Good evening, all my brothers and sisters, to YouTube, to Facebook, to all who come upon this video. We're going to talk about something that is very important tonight. And just to let you know, I don't post videos as often because I want to make sure that what I'm posting is coming from the truth, is coming from a place of sincerity, and it's coming from a place of truth, something that is important, something that God's people need to hear, and quite frankly, anybody needs to hear. Everybody needs to hear um, these messages, right? But I don't post a video all the time because I don't want to water it down. So that's why you're not seeing the videos on a regular basis, is because I really want to um, be responsible for the tools that I've been given by the Lord. So we're going to talk about something tonight, and it's called normalcy bias. Now, I talked about normalcy bias before in an earlier video several weeks ago, but something at work, a conversation that I had with someone really kind of had me thinking, because we can get in this mode of, like, those of us who are watching and who know what's going on, we can get into this mode of forgetting that the world is completely asleep, that the world has no idea what's about to come upon them. And if you're watching this and you're not saved, listen, this video is not to knock you. It's not to, you know, beat you up, because I don't want to do that. Okay, I want to show you that normalcy bias and and also what we're lacking in the society is societal awareness. Okay, to where the society is not aware of what's going on around them. So this nation that we live in, and it's the entire world, but this nation that we live in is plagued by two major things right now. One is normalcy bias, and one is a lack of societal awareness, or you could call it a lack of cultural or national awareness. You could put any of those terms in there, and they would fit, right? People are not grounded in reality. And the conversation that I had at work really showed me that not everybody, in fact, a good 80-90% of the people are not aware. And this person that I talked to, she was in the military, and these are things that she ought to have known. She ought to have known the situation in Russia and Ukraine. And again, this isn't knocking anybody, but even people in the military. And I love my veterans. Okay, again, this is not about knocking anybody, but truth is truth, whether we feel something or not. Okay, reality and facts. There's no versions of facts. There's no versions of the truth. Okay, and the conversation that we had, she didn't like the fact that Putin invaded Ukraine, and she said all she felt was that Putin doesn't want Ukraine to have freedom. And I tried explaining to her that yes, I'm not taking any sides. I am not pro Putin, I'm not pro Ukraine. The side I'm taking is the side of truth. And I told her I'm not condoning the deaths, I'm not condoning the bloodshed, I'm not condoning any of that. But I tried explaining to her that, and again, she was in the military. She was in reserves. And I tried explaining to her that, this has been a boiling point for some time now, and it's more than just, nations don't just invade other nations just because they had a bad day, or because they just want to take over. There are reasons why nations do the things that they do. Are they smart, or are they calculated? Are they evil? Is it, what are whatever those reasons are? Okay, we're talking about, logistics. We're talking about what's really going on, despite atrocities, despite all those things which I don't condone. But there are always reasons. There are always factors involved, and these factors don't involve feelings. Okay, and we talked about, I told her about how NATO had been encroaching upon Russia's border for years, and how, Russia, Putin feels that he's been cornered, and that before the war started, there were several peace talks, and they were all shot down. Putin decided that he was going to invade Ukraine because he was going to prevent Ukraine from NATO membership, and that's what started the whole war. And now this has become a geopolitical meltdown. And I didn't get into the whole what's really going on behind the scenes in the spiritual realm. I didn't get into any of that, mainly because we didn't have much time. But I did ask her, do you believe in objective truth or subjective truth? Meaning, and she asked me, she didn't know what that meant. And I said, well, if something is objectively true, it means that it's true regardless of how you feel about it. And I asked her, do you believe that? Do you believe that things are true despite how you feel? She said, I believe that there are some things, but not everything. And I said, so we all know that murder is wrong, correct? But, and we can all be in agreement that we know murder is wrong. But if there is no objective truth, then, the next guy who decides that he's going to get a gun and pull the trigger, we can't honestly say, if there is no objective truth, that what he just did was wrong. That him taking a life isn't wrong. And, I didn't have time to get into it. And we're going to get into normalcy bias. But I wanted to give you a little context of why I'm making this video tonight. Because, again, I know I've made an earlier video, but I just felt the need to do it again because, this world that we live in, it is a dark, delusional world. And our friends, our family members, our co-workers, the people that we care about, the people that we don't know, everybody, if they are not grounded in the truth, if they're not saved, if they don't have a biblical understanding, okay, if they don't know Jesus Christ, if they don't know the truth, they are going to be in the normalcy bias mode. And even if you're a prepper, even if you're someone who sees the warships miles away and knows that something is up, even then, if you're not rooted in the truth, there is still the normalcy bias that kicks in, especially when you see things that are very concerning. You don't want it to happen. You hope that's not going to happen, and you convince yourself that it's not going to happen. And I respect what all the preppers do. I respect them getting the news out. I'm not saying that every single one of them is like this, but a lot of times, even the preppers, the ones I listen to aren't so much like that, but I have listened to quite a few, and I'm not a prepper. I'm just saying that I've listened to quite a few who, have, had that plague of normalcy bias. And so we're going to get into that because I don't want anybody to, maybe you didn't catch the last video, or maybe, you're a follower of the channel and I don't know you. And of course, you don't know me personally. And maybe you're a skeptic, or maybe you're someone who wants to know answers, but you're not sure. Or maybe you don't want to know at all, and you're just trolling this channel. But whatever the case may be, I don't want to get to heaven and hear God say, which I'm sure he won't say it like this, but Why didn't you exercise the opportunities that you had, that I had given you, to share the truth when I have given you the truth? And, I want to make sure that I'm doing my part. And I care about you. Even if you don't know me, I care about you. And I don't want you to be swept away in the lies that are going on. So let's get into it. I threw out a disclaimer, but I just wanted to get you guys thinking that, first of all, this is everybody. Unless you are born again, unless you are not blinded, then you are going to be subjugated to normalcy bias, and that's a very dangerous place to be in. And I don't want you to. My heart's desire when I wake up in the morning, when I think about what's coming upon this earth, I often get this feeling that, well, it's not really a feeling. It's more of because I know it's going to happen. It's more of an understanding, but it's a solemn understanding. It's a knowing that when these things come upon the earth and they're full fledged, and people see the truth for what it is, that there are going to be people who are still going to be stuck in normalcy bias. And those are the people, sadly, that's going to be a majority, 95% of the people on earth, are going to be stuck in that, and that's going to kill them. And I think about that often. And so I just want to do my part in trying to get you to understand that normalcy bias is a very real thing, and you probably have it if you deny the things that are going on around you. So I mean, it's a given. If you deny what you're seeing around you, it is a given that you have normalcy bias. I mean, that's just the raw nature of it. Okay, but so we're gonna get into some definitions here, and let me pull up. I'm gonna go over here, and I was gonna do a slideshow, but I'm just gonna want to do this. So normalcy bias, as you can see here, we have a group of people who are enjoying themselves at the beach, and there's a nuclear blast behind them. There's a huge mushroom cloud caused by a nuclear blast. And as you can see, they're all smiling and they're all jogging on the beach, and looks like they're posing for a group photo. Looks like they've had a pretty good day. Yet there's a nuclear blast that happened. Now, of course, I know that this picture is probably it's photoshopped, but it is the representation of normalcy bias. This is what normalcy bias looks like. And so I just want you to get this image in your head right here, that these are the people that are your neighbors, your friends, your family members. These are the same people who will attack you and will scoff at your information, will scoff at the things that you have to show them, to help them. These are the same types of people. It's because, as you can see, they're so rooted in their own personal lives. See, we all have a built-in, as sinners, we all have a built-in narcissism factor. Okay? We all love ourselves in a way that we should not. And of course, we know that when we get saved, we realize our true nature, how bad we really are, and how good Jesus really is. And so, God begins to work on us in that way. But we still have a sin nature that it has narcissistic tendencies. Now, there are some people who are, their whole life is narcissism, right? But there is also a spiritual narcissism. not just a fleshly you know, or a narcissism that would exist in the mind. There is also a spiritual narcissism, and that's what we're seeing right now, and that's where normalcy bias comes in. This, and I've talked about this before, but uh, spiritual narcissism is something that Satan and the fallen world and the principalities and powers, they're all working together to create this spiritual narcissism. And it blinds people to the facts, and they may have never suffered from any kind of mental disorder in their life, but yet when it comes to this, they show clear signs of normalcy bias, which is really ultimately, when you boil it down, it is a byproduct of a narcissistic mindset, which is reality doesn't matter as long as I'm happy. As long as I'm happy, reality doesn't matter. And that mindset will kill them. And so if you're one of these people who has this mindset, understand something. That mindset has already costed you relationships in your life. It's already costed you an inability to see your own mistakes, your own faults. And I'm not talking about narcissistic people in the way that we would view them. I'm not talking about necessarily psychopaths. I'm talking about the everyday, the average Joe. Okay, the everyday men and women. Okay, we are really no better than, you know, than the psychopath. If you really want to put it in terms like that, we're really no better than they are. They have a full fledged, um, they have a seared conscience, if you will. But we all have that narcissistic tendency, some more than others. I'll put it that way. Some more than others, but we all have it. And normalcy bias is basically like fuel. It rides, it cannot exist without that. So just understand that normalcy bias is, before we move forward, normalcy bias has a lot to do with narcissism. And the narcissism that we're seeing mostly in society today is a spiritual narcissism. Because the farther away you get from God, the more of a narcissist you will become. I call that spiritual narcissism, because it's not necessarily a narcissistic tendency that was developed, let's say, because of a abusive household. This kind of narcissism will develop in anybody, with even if you have a perfectly fine, or what society would call a perfectly fine background. This spiritual narcissism will beset anybody. It can and has affected everyone, because when you are faced with a pandemic that changed the world radically, and you still live life like nothing has happened, there's an issue with that. And that is, again, what I would call spiritual narcissism. Because for the spiritual narcissist, which is, again, 95% of the world, reality doesn't matter. You just want to be happy. So reality doesn't matter. Facts don't matter. You just want to be happy. And that sounds so great and lovely, and the world loves to use that, right? But in reality, that thinking will kill you. So this is the definition of normalcy bias. Normalcy bias, or normality bias, refers to an attitude that is entered when facing a disaster. People with a normalcy bias have difficulties reacting to something they have not experienced before. They also tend to interpret warnings in the most optimistic way possible, seizing on any ambiguities to infer a less serious situation. So, I want you to just take a minute to process what we just read. This is not something that is new. This is not like a recent normalcy bias is not a recent term. It's been more used recently, but it's not a recent term. Normalcy bias can have anything to do. It doesn't necessarily mean like big catastrophes. We're not necessarily talking about that, although we are going to get into that. But normalcy bias can infer to anything. It can infer to someone who's in a toxic relationship, and because um, there have been red flags, there have been situations that have happened. There's been warning signs, and the outcome of this toxic relationship is taxing you. It is affecting you. But because it hasn't hit the level of, let's say, you're being beat senseless every day, you still stay there because for you that's normal. That's so you're suffering from normalcy bias. You're suffering from normalcy bias if you think that you can never have an accident at work, that nothing can ever happen to you at work, that if you're just doing your job, that nothing's going to touch you. If you're doing everything X, Y, and Z right, following all the protocols, that no accidents can actually happen. That's normalcy bias. Or you get in your car and you don't assume that you're going to get into a wreck. When you crank on your car, a lot of times we don't even think that we're going to get into a wreck, 5 or 10 minutes. And to be honest with you, I can tell you that normalcy bias has affected even me in that way, which is I recently got into a car wreck. I'm fine now. I've got a new vehicle. God provided, but you turn on the car and then you go out and you do whatever you got to do, and then you get into a wreck and you could not have planned for it. You didn't know it was going to happen. You weren't thinking about it. You're just going about your everyday routine or life, and then you get into a wreck and you suffered from normalcy bias. You didn't think nothing could happen. Now, I'm not saying be paranoid, but I'm saying that to discredit anything that is evident that it's, let's say, it's evident that things are not normal. It's evident things are spiraling seemingly out of control. Now we know God is in control, but we know that things on the earth are spiraling out of control, for better, word use here. And so we can see things and we can say, that's not normal. That's not normal. That's not normal. That doesn't happen every day. That's not normal. And yet we have a society that continues on with life thinking that nothing ever happened. And that's normalcy bias. Okay. I'll give you another example. I was, a few years ago, working at this company, and they had sent people down to Florida because of, I think it was Hurricane Ian, if I remember correctly. I believe it was Ian, but don't quote me on that. I can't. We've had so many hurricanes, I can't remember exactly which hurricane it was, but it was a few years ago. And so I got sent down there, and they provided a hotel and whatnot. But the hotel, as soon as we got there, the hotel, it was obvious that there was some things that weren't working right. Certain rooms you couldn't go in because they had water damage, and so when we were doing our job down there, we were dealing with a lot of locals, a lot of customers, and my job was to help the customer all day. My job was to pull orders. My job was to load their vehicles. My job was to check on the status of certain things that they came into the store for. That was my job. So my job was to communicate with the customer. Okay. And I can tell you that all day for 40 hours, okay, a week, I was talking to people, talking to these locals. For two and a half weeks I was down there. And I'll tell you that honestly, about 75% of the people that I talked to did not leave when the evacuation was given to leave. The evacuation notice that Florida gave its citizens that says you're going to need you. It would be very wise for you to leave. We're encouraging everybody to evacuate. There were some people that said, "Oh, we've had hurricanes before. Nothing's going to happen. We're just going to get some heavy rain, and we'll just plow through it." And they didn't evacuate. Some did, but a lot didn't, and more didn't than did. So their houses were flooded. Their roofs were torn up. Their water wasn't working. People that had boats, because we're in Florida, so people, can where I was in Florida, people had boats, next to their houses. They had like private docks and stuff, and their boats were turned upside down. I mean, you're talking about about 75% of the people did not prepare at all for anything like that. Okay, they just assumed that because they've had these hurricanes before that nothing was going to happen. And then this hurricane came and they just blew it off like it was nothing. And we had people who lost family members, friends, people that lost their houses. They were gone. Their houses were decimated. I saw a picture where a whole town was under. I mean, it's like their porches were underwater, and their roofs were torn off, and their houses are gone. I mean, they're everything in their house is ruined. They can't live there anymore. There was an employee who worked at that store, and she couldn't even go back to her house. She actually had to move in with her parents, like Midwest somewhere, like Illinois or something like that, because her house was destroyed. So she couldn't even live where she lived. She had to completely move. So all that to say is that normalcy bias was a big factor in these people that lost their stuff. And it comes down to a spiritual narcissism. Okay? Because they were so confident that nothing could ever happen to them, or that nothing could ever happen to their city, or nothing could ever happen to their neighborhood, or nothing could ever happen to their homes or to their family members, that they took a very dangerous risk and stayed where they should have left. And they suffered the consequences because of normalcy bias. Normalcy bias will kill you. When you see warning signs, when you see things happening in the world, for example, for all intents and purposes, we're already in World War III. The U.S. just has not gotten involved yet. But we're already in World War III. And again, we're not involved. I mean, we are involved, but we're not, let's just say, to the degree of Ukraine, where Ukraine is literally killing Russians with their own guns. We are not in mass over, doing that in large numbers, right? So we haven't officially entered in. Officially, we're doing it by proxy. But World War III has already begun, and it's escalating out of control. I mean, every day that you go by, something happens. And now China's about to invade Taiwan. They have ferries with troops. I mean, they're about to invade. It's the same exact thing that happened right before Putin invaded Ukraine. We've had a pandemic, which of course is a plandemic. It was planned out, by certain, let's just say, higher ups. And, that changed the total face of the earth. It changed the whole dynamic of the earth. And it was a grooming mechanism. And, it was definitely to get people ready and prepared for, the Antichrist system, right? But my point with all this is that we see these things escalating. We see all these signs. We see these warning flags. Even if you're listening to this and you're not a Christian and you're not saved, and you're probably like tuning me out, you're probably thinking about all the things that you can say in the comments to try to. The thing is, I know that you're suffering from normalcy bias. I know that you have a response, that you as a grown person have free will to choose what you're going to do, right? You can either stay in your normalcy bias, or you can do something about it. You can accept the truth, right? But you know, things are not normal, and the normalcy bias is affecting everything. Um, and it's again a spiritual narcissism. So let's go to this slide here. As you can see, there's an ostrich that has its head in the ground. Normalcy bias may kill you. The normalcy bias refers to a inclination for people to lessen the probability of possible threats or their dangerous repercussions. Consequently, the normalcy bias causes many people not to prepare for natural disasters, accidents, and world pandemics. I would include nuclear war in there as well. In simple terms, it's the ostrich effect. When uneducated, unthinking, unconcerned people sense danger, they look to the government, when often the government is the problem. And as we see right now in this world, and let's just talk about our nation, because if you're an American, then let's just stay here. Let's just talk about our nation for a second, because we live here. Our government is not for us. The government, when the founding fathers created, or not created, but when they founded this nation, they were very, 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 you could say that they were coming fresh from a tyrannical system. It was Great Britain at the time, or it was the United Kingdom. And they dealt with, they were being oppressed religiously. Their religious freedoms were being oppressed, I should say. Their wants and needs as a people was being oppressed. Okay, they were being dictated what they could and could not do in a society. So when they came here, okay, they were very, you could say, because it was so fresh on their mind, that they never wanted to experience or have their children or their children experience what they experienced. Okay, so the founding fathers founded this country off of principles that were about freedom and liberty, and you know, and how the people vote, that they vote to elect presidents and senators and politicians, how the politicians and the senators and the presidents is supposed to serve the people, because again, we are supposed to be a democracy or a republic. And but because we live in a fallen world where we have fallen men who don't do the right thing most of the time, they actually do the wrong thing. And in their inclinations, their imaginations of their hearts is evil. And we have people that lie. We have people that falsify information, and we have a rebellious world that doesn't want anything to do with God. So naturally, over time, okay, this nation reversed the roles, to where now we serve the government, and we do what the government tells us to do, and we depend on the government, right? That we are basically controlled by the narrative of the government. In normalcy bias, okay, don't think that these governments don't understand what normalcy bias is. You see, we're living in a day and age where people think that, oh, well, the government will tell us if something bad is going to happen. The news agency is going to tell us if something bad is going to happen. And they don't realize that all this time, while they've lived in their normalcy bias, while they've lived in societal, I would say, sleep, okay, that right underneath their noses, people with evil intentions and evil plans have gotten in power, and they've started to change things. And this is not an overnight situation. This has happened for decades. But we're reaching a culmination point here where there are so many factors involved. First of all, we have a nation that is promoting the woke transgender community. And there's not really much of a community as it is a cult. Um, I don't have to go into all that. We all know what they do. Okay, we know about the drag queens, how they indoctrinate children. We don't have to go into that right now, but we know that that's going. We know that's a very broad thing, and it's happening in a lot of places, right? We have abortion. We have now people wanting states, actually talking about aborting the baby after it's already born. I mean, and it being, it being a law that's already in the works of being passed in some places. We have just what we would used to call the worst of the worst individuals now being, celebrated and being called that it's a part of, that their sexual perversions are a part of diversity. I mean, we have nations invading other nations. And you say, well, that happens all the time. No, it doesn't. Now, if you're talking about the U.S., then yes, we have invaded other nations. We have done that, okay? And we have done things that are unjust as well. We have taken the limit too far. We have done things as a nation that, are questionable at best. And at worst, they're just downright corrupt and evil. So, all of what I'm implying here with all of this is that when you live in normalcy bias, things that shouldn't be normal, to you they become normal. And they become normal to you because you simply don't care. Because of the spiritual narcissism that you have and that has plagued the society. What is spiritual narcissism? This is just a term that I've thought about using. But what I would define spiritual narcissism is, again, it's not something that you may have. Let's just say, for example, you had parents that gave you everything that you wanted. Okay, so you were positionally when you were growing up. Positionally, you were basically, you could become a very successful person, and you could have a family of your own, and and you were set up in a great way. And I'm not knocking you if you've had wealthy parents, or if you've had parents that have helped you in a lot of ways. I'm not knocking that at all. That's fine. But more than most of the time, when you have people that never tell you no, when you have people that never tell you you can't have this, okay, you will develop what I call a spiritual narcissism. Someone who is a clinical narcissist, I would define. Of course, we know what a clinical narcissist. They have a narcissistic personality disorder, right? Which I believe is also very much spiritual in nature as well. But that kind of narcissism would come from, if your parents abused you, or if you were raped, or if you felt powerless as a child, and you developed a psychopathy or an antisocial personality disorder, right? So I'm not talking about clinical narcissists, although I understand that there are spiritual elements to that as well. I'm talking about strictly what I would call spiritual narcissism. And I hope I'm not losing you all here by talking about this, because I'm going somewhere with this. I want you to understand something. That our society has basically become a society of reprobates and people with seared consciences, which which in the Bible, when it talks about someone having a seared conscience with a hot iron, it's talking about like all the things that I just mentioned: the pedophiles, the murderers, the transgenders, the people that have taken things to the extreme, and they don't care, and they have literally no conscience anymore. Okay, we live in a society where everybody has a seared conscience. And even if you were born privileged, which I'm not knocking that, if you are, that's fine. That's great. I'm happy that you had that upbringing, okay? But what's happened is that instead of using that and saying, okay, I'm going to follow what my parents did, and I'm going to try to be responsible, what happened is that people developed a spiritual narcissism. This generation that we live in, okay, has developed a spiritual narcissism. But I'm not just talking about the young people here. I'm not just talking about Gen Z or millennials or the Generation X. I'm not talking about just them. I'm talking about everybody that's alive, even the older people, even senior citizens. Okay, when things have happened in your life, and you get accustomed to that and you get used to that, you will develop a normalcy bias. And normalcy bias exists because all of us are sinners, okay? And we all have a hint of narcissism in us. When we are affected by normalcy bias, we develop what I call, again, a spiritual narcissism, which is, it's not brought on by, again, abuse or other factors. It's brought on by the fact that you think that nothing can ever happen to you, that nothing can ever happen to your world, that nothing can ever happen, that you can get whatever you want, right? And that you can have whatever you want, and that everything's going to continue as it was since day one, right? That is normalcy bias, but I would also call that spiritual narcissism. And that will kill you, because when the nuclear weapons detonate, because reality doesn't have feelings. Facts don't have feelings. Truth doesn't have feelings. Reality is that we're in a very dangerous time. We are at the very end of the world as we know it. Okay? And all the warning signs are there. There's also what I call the boy cried wolf syndrome. And that is, for some time now, I mainly use this when I'm talking about the Rapture. Because people will say, well, in 1988 there was a book that came out or something was around that year, where there was a book that came out that said like 99 reasons for the rapture to happen in 1988 or something like that. And there were false teachers back then that wrote books and convinced people that they were these prophets, and that and people bought into it. And then when the rapture didn't happen on that day, right, they said, I'm not going to believe in the rapture. And some of them even said, I'm not going to believe in God anymore. I call that the boy cried wolf syndrome, because when the rapture actually does happen, they're going to be caught off guard, to the point where they're going to be completely and utterly shocked and terrified, because the rapture actually happened. The wolf essentially showed up. Now, I'm not comparing the rapture to a wolf at all. I'm just simply saying that that is the boy cried wolf syndrome. And this society and where we're at, it's, some people are, that normalcy bias is developed through the boy cried wolf syndrome. Is that maybe you grew up in the Cold War era and you heard all the talks of nukes then, and nobody ever got nuked, so you grew up thinking that nuclear weapons could never be used, and so you developed a normalcy bias, which becomes a spiritual narcissism, because now you've molded and shaped your life around the notion that nothing like that could ever happen. And so you live your life thinking that basically you're, in a sense, you're invincible, or that this nation is invincible. And that's dangerous. And, again, running to the government when things do escalate, that's dangerous as well. That's a part of normalcy bias. You think that because years and decades and since when your great grandfathers were living, when the government was maybe a little less corrupt, um, you think that that is still the same government that we have now, and it's not the same government. When those men died in World War II, they were dying for a completely different country than the country that we have now. The government that they had then was very different from the government we have now. Now, was there still corruption? Yes, but it was a very different time. It was um, things could be. There was more dignity back then. There was more people want uh, basically there wasn't as much lying, but there was still lying, but there wasn't as much of it, right? And people think that now that's the same government that we have now, and it's not the same government. This nation is in a free fall. It's deteriorating. And people think that it's still the same as it was then, and it's not. It's not at all. The warning signs are coming back. Okay? The warning signs are coming back, just like how warning signs were coming in World War II. And even America was like, we're not going to get involved. We're not going to get involved. And then Pearl Harbor happened. And, I'm not going to go off on that. Some people will say that's an inside job. I'm not going to go into that. But what I will say for a fact is that we knew that Japan was planning something and the United States didn't move fast enough or didn't move at all, knowing that information. So, again, I don't go down the rabbit hole of conspiracies because I just believe what the Bible says. But it is a fact that the United States had intel that Japan was coming this way, okay, and their intentions were not good, and we didn't do anything about it. So the signs are coming back again. The signs are coming back again, and the thing is, people are stuck in normalcy bias, and it's consumed them. It's consumed them, and they literally they will try to consume you if you're not careful. They will try to take what you know, and they will try to consume you and try to get you to shed off the truth. And of course, if you're a Christian, you're not going to shed off the truth. Okay, but they'll do that because, again, what does a narcissist do? A narcissist wants you to believe his narrative. Okay, listen. Before I got saved, I I was not a good person. And of course, I know everybody, all my brothers and sisters in the chat are going to say we none of us are good people. None of us were ever good before we got saved. And yes, I understand that. But before I got saved, I was a delinquent. Okay, let's just leave it there for now. But I was a delinquent, and I was in and out of psych wards. I was in and out of the mental hospital, and since age 11. Okay, I actually tried attacking my mother when I was age 11, and you know, and so I spent a lot of time in the in psychotherapy and all that stuff before I got saved. When I got saved, all that changed, and I don't want to hurt anybody. Okay, God has completely changed my thinking, I will say that just because of my testimony and because of where I've come from, I know I have met psychopaths. I have met clinical narcissists. I have met these people. It's not one of these things that when I say it, that I take lightly, that I just say it. I have spent my whole life, almost my whole life, around these people. Okay, I know what it looks. If someone is a sociopath at my job, a clinical sociopath, I'm talking about clinically. Okay, and they have an antisocial personality disorder. I can see it right away. I can literally see it, and I don't go around thinking that everybody is, but I can literally see it if they have it. And so I can tell you that I know what narcissism is. And narcissism is, a lot of times their tactics are, I want you to believe my lies. Even though my lies aren't grounded in reality or logic, okay? Even though you've busted some of my lies, I still want you to believe my lies. And if you don't believe my lies, then I'm going to gaslight you. And I'm going to make you feel like you're just this crazy, terrible person and it's all your fault. That's what normalcy bias is doing right now. That's why I call it spiritual narcissism. Because that's what narcissism does. Normalcy bias makes you think that nothing can ever happen to you. And spiritual narcissism makes you think that, you know, basically that you're going to continue living the way you've lived, and you know you're just going to get everything you want, and life is going to go on as normal, and you can treat people however you want to treat them, and it doesn't matter, you know, and nothing can ever happen, right? So, and when you approach these people, I'm sure when you've witnessed to these people, when you've told them about Jesus Christ, I'm just talking about anybody, like just if you're out in public and you're witnessing to somebody and they try to paint you as this crazy person, they try to fact check you, right? You see Facebook trying to fact check people. You know, all of that is to, again, we're dealing with a government that has evil intentions, and they know what normalcy bias is. So they put things in place to help induce more normalcy bias, help induce spiritual narcissism, because they want that. They don't want people. They want people getting upset when you tell them the truth. They want people painting you as the bad guy so that when you do tell the truth, the people around you are going to think that you're the bad guy. And this, again, normalcy bias, the spiritual narcissism, okay, they're like connected. They're the same, essentially, and it's plagued the society. It's consumed the society. Okay, and everybody, if you're not saved, you do have this. I mean, you know, you just do. You have it. That's the reason why you won't come to the truth of Jesus Christ. That's the reason why you refuse to see the things that are going on in this world. That's the reason why, you know, you mock and scoff at other believers. It's because you have this. And this isn't like, you know, this isn't like, you can't blame this on some mental disorder, because this has been brought on by your choices of rejecting the truth. Okay, you don't have the luxury to be like, you, if you're lost, okay, you can't say, most of the time you cannot say that you have the luxury of using the excuse that, you know, oh, I'm a psychopath, so therefore, you know, I became, you know, I had this disorder since I was young because someone abused me, right? Like, you don't have that luxury. The majority of you watching this don't have that luxury. The majority of you watching this, it's been brought on, this spiritual narcissism has been brought on by your choices of rejecting the truth. Okay? And again, that's why I made a distinction between clinical people who have it and then the spiritual side of it. Okay? So again, I hope I'm not losing you guys here. I just wanted to get that out. Like, I wanted to show you that that's what's going on here. It's a society that has become so induced in itself that when reality is happening around them, okay, let me just put it this way, and I'll leave it with this. Okay, we have one more slide to go over, but before we go there, let me just leave it with this. You have to be out of your mind to believe that nothing is going on. You have to have a form of narcissism to believe that nothing is going on. Because these right here are all the things that are coming upon this earth. We've got a third world war that's coming. And it's already begun. We've got the rapture that's going to happen at any moment. We have the evidence of a cashless society, the CBDCs, and all the things involving BRICS, and we have all these red flags as far as now other countries have dropped the US dollar. So we see the warning signs for a cashless society, a new world order. We've seen Schwab and his elites talk about how you'll own nothing and be happy, and 15-minute cities, and ways they're going to contain people, and how they groom the masses during COVID. We see the evidence of the new world order. We see the evidence of a single global religion. The attempt to dismember Christianity, the attempt to basically say that our belief in God and our belief in the Bible is just hate speech, right? This attempt to silence us, right? So that they can have their religion, that they can have their lie. We have an antichrist dictator. We see that all of these things that are happening upon the earth is just playing right into this soon to be revealed antichrist, and that how he's going to arise from the ashes to be the world's quote unquote hero, although we know he's the most diabolical man that's ever existed. There are billions of deaths that are coming, okay? And very, very soon, Revelation 6, verses 7 through 8 talks about that, how there's going to be billions of people that are going to die. Satanic lies and false miracles. Man, we have the so-called alien UFO disclosures. We have, all these satanic cults. We have, just all this stuff that is just coming out of the woodwork, right? And it's so prevalent that it's undeniable. Like, you can't deny it. The store Target selling, satanic clothing at the stores, right? And being marketed for kids. I mean, it's just in your face. I mean, these are all warning signs. The mark of the beast, Revelation 13. So we see that there was an attempt and a sort of way to gauge how people would respond to a so-called pandemic that would, take over the entire world for, at least 2 years, and gauging people's responses, gauging how people are going to react when they actually enforce the mark of the beast after the rapture of the church. Utter and complete searing of the human conscience. We just talked about that. If we go to the book of Romans 2, 2 Timothy talks about this, but if we go to the book of Romans 2, we see there too that it talks about how because they did not like to retain God in their conscience, God gave them up to a reprobate mind to do the things that are unseemly. And so we see a society that is again experiencing, they are rejecting God, and by rejecting God, by default, your mind becomes more and more seared. And what is a narcissist? Let me ask you a question. Does a narcissist have a good, healthy mind? Or do they have a seared conscience? They have a seared conscience. Okay? Does someone who has normalcy bias, do they have a healthy mind? Are they cognitively aware of the facts? No, I would say that they're in danger of having a seared conscience. Now, I've talked about all this stuff, and I hope that you've bared with me, and I thank you guys for all the encouraging comments and stuff. But the most important thing is that I want to get people. I want to get people to know Jesus. I really want people who's watching this to share this video, and to like this video, and to share it to their loved ones. Because on here, we're going to talk about the gospel every night. Every time I make a video, I will always share the gospel, because that is the most important thing. Is that I want to see people in heaven. I don't like knowing that people are going to be left to this Antichrist. Is it their choice? Yes. Is it on them? Yes. Was it their responsibility to choose? Yes. But it's still very much sad, and I want to see people get saved, right? And I don't want to see people, um, you know, thinking that God doesn't love them, that there wasn't a way out, that there wasn't a way of escape, okay? Because God does love you. Jesus plus no works equals salvation. If you're watching this and you're not a Christian, okay, and you're not saved, you're not a believer in Christ, and you're wondering about who God is, and if you're subscribed to me or if you're just watching and you're not subscribed, that's fine. But if you're wondering why I talk about God and why I talk about the Bible and why I talk about and why I am so adamant on getting these things out there, is because I was saved. As I mentioned before, I came from a very bad background. Okay, I had an abusive mother. Okay, I was a very violent kid. Um, and I really was not all of the way there emotionally either. Um, and I got into a lot of trouble. Okay, I got kicked out of school. I got suspended. I, I've been back of police cars as a child. I've been locked in mental facilities for 2 or 3 weeks. My my life growing up was a life of pain and violence and misery, and but God saved me. I asked Jesus to save me almost a decade ago, and I was so done with the life that I was living. I was done with the doctors and the psychologists telling me that that I had this diagnosis, that I had that diagnosis. I was so fed up because they were all saying different things, and I was just feeling more and more hopeless because my situations at the time were not improving. In fact, I would have probably killed myself if I had not asked Jesus to save me. And so I know Jesus is real. I know that he is who he says that he is. Okay? And when I got saved, I felt the love of God for the first time. And I don't want people leaving these videos thinking that God doesn't love them. So that's why I do these at the end, because this is the most important thing. Okay? Jesus plus no works equals salvation. You ask, what does that mean? It means that as human beings, we work to obtain something. We go to work. We go to work to obtain a paycheck. Okay, we work to to get certain things from, let's just be honest, our spouses or our friends. It's more of a contract situation. Like, I'm only going to do so much. If you do as long as you do this for me, I'll do this. But I'm only going to do this much if you don't pull your weight, basically. Okay, so we live in this works-based society, this works-based world, which is, we have to do something to earn, or we're prideful. We feel as if we have to do something to get something in return, right? That we have to check all the things down the list in order to get the prize or whatever, right? That's the mentality that we have. But see, that's not how salvation works. Because with Jesus Christ, okay, salvation comes through him alone. We cannot work to get salvation because not a single one of us are worthy of salvation. We're all sinners. The book of James says that if you've broken one part of the law, you've broken it all. That means that if you've lied once, you're guilty of murdering somebody. That means that if you've murdered somebody, you're guilty of raping somebody. That means that if you've stolen a candy bar, you're guilty of being, a drunkard, right? If you're a drunkard, you're guilty of being, a human trafficker. I mean, The list goes on because the way God sees it, sin is sin, and if you break in one part, you're guilty of it all. You're a sinner, and we're born sinners. Okay, the way God sees it, sin is sin, and it doesn't matter who you are or what you're doing. Okay, um, so we are not able to earn God's grace. We can't earn salvation. We it's impossible for us. Okay, we cannot work to get to heaven. Okay, all other religions, and these are why, and that's why they're religions. That's why they're not the truth. That's why they're not real, and that's why they're, the people in it are constantly trying to guess if when they die, are they going, are they going to a good place or are they going to a bad place? With Jesus Christ, we can know absolutely 100% certain that we're going to heaven because it's what he did for us. When he died on the cross, it wasn't just him dying because, he loved people. Yeah, that was it. But if he had not died and if he had not rose again, okay, we would never have the chance to go to, we wouldn't even have the ability to choose to be forgiven. God wanted us to be able to be secure in him once and for all. So when Jesus Christ died on the cross and he rose again, he did that so that he could see you in heaven, that you would be written down in the Lamb's book of life, that you would be forever secure in Jesus' name, that you would be forever changed, okay? And that's why God did that. That's why he sent Christ down. Yes, it was about love, but it was much more than that. It was about rescuing you from your destiny of hell. He didn't want you to go to hell. So he came down and basically paid the penalty of what you deserved. And we can go really deep into that, but that is the gospel of your salvation. That is the message. Okay? Salvation is not your good works. It's not your religion, meaning it's not going to a church building, it's not saying, certain churchy things or whatnot. It's not rituals. It's not having 5 Bibles in your houses that gets you saved. It's not, shouting hallelujah. That's not what gets you saved. Okay? It's simply God's work on the cross. For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. That's Ephesians 2, verses 8 through 9. These are the ABCs of salvation, and I'll lay them out here, okay, so that you can just see them, that it's just easy, because God made it simple. God made salvation simple. We complicate it because, again, we like putting our works in it. We like saying, oh, well, I at least have to do something, and you're telling me that God will just forgive me right then and there. I have to do something. If you put works in it, if you put yourself in it, if you put any ounce of you in it, trying to get yourself into heaven, you will not go to heaven. Okay? How do you get to heaven? First, you admit you're a sinner. Romans 3, verse 23. Then you believe that Jesus is God, who shed his blood for you on that cross for your sin. Romans 6:23. And then you confess to God that you are in need of salvation, and that he is able to save you. John 1:12 and Romans 10:9. All who call upon the name of Jesus for eternal salvation will be forgiven, rapture ready, and secured for heaven. So guys, it's not about going to the church building. It's not about going and looking all good to go to church. None of that saves you. That really means nothing. Okay? That's just all a man-made thing. That's a man-made construct that people have done for tradition purposes that has nothing to do with salvation. Your salvation is not dependent upon how often you go to church or what you wear or the people that you're hanging around. You're not saved because your parents are saved. You have to make that personal decision for yourself. Okay? Just because your grandmother's saved or your grandpa saved, or your mom saved, or both your parents are saved. They cannot save you. You have to make that decision, okay? But all you're doing is it's really literally salvation. When I got saved, it literally took 15 seconds. I mean, I wasn't counting, but I knew it took less than a minute for me to cry out and tell God, I'm done. I don't want to commit suicide. You know, I've lived this miserable life and I don't want to go to hell. So I'm asking that you please forgive me. I believe that you died on that cross for me. I believe that if I ask you for salvation, you'll save me. And so right now I'm asking for salvation. I believe that you're God. And on that moment, he saved me. Okay? I believed that he was who he said he was. I didn't know who he was, but I put my faith that he died and that he resurrected for me. That he paid the penalty. I put my faith in that, and I was saved. And if you say something along those lines to the Lord with the sincerity of your heart, okay, and you really want to be saved, God will save you. Okay? And don't get all twisted and think, oh, well, how am I really going to know if I'm being serious or, no. See, the thing is, when you want to know the truth, God will draw you in. God will honor that. If you don't want to know the truth, God is not going to honor that, okay? So if you're asking to know the truth, if you want to be saved, God's going to honor that, and he's going to know that you're being sincere because he can read your heart, he can read your mind. Okay? But if you just do it out of, you don't care, right? You're just doing it to make somebody happy. That's not sincerity. But God's going to know. He will know if you're serious, and that's not something that you have to explain to him. He'll just know already. Okay? So when you get saved, okay, understand this, that you're getting saved because of God's grace. It's nothing that you're doing. It's nothing that you've done. It is the gift of God, lest any man should boast, okay? So you're just simply admitting that you're a sinner and that you're believing on the sacrifice and the atonement that he did for you and that he rose from the grave on the third day and that you confess that you are in need of the salvation plan of God, then you will be saved, okay? That's how you get saved, guys. It's so simple, okay? And if you're still confused, listen, just follow the ABCs. They're right here. Pause the video, and then I would encourage you really to ask God, if you're true, if you're who you say you are, please show me, because I don't want to, I'm afraid of where I'm going to go when I die. I'll tell you, if you ask God that, okay, trust me, God will reveal himself to you, okay. Guys, it's time to get saved. Okay? It's time to get saved. It's time to put your faith in the blood of Jesus Christ, because, again, this normalcy bias is going to continue on until the day of the rapture and after. And you don't want to be left behind for what's coming. So I encourage you to get saved. I encourage you right now to follow the ABCs of salvation. Okay? And I encourage you to just call upon the name of the Lord. Okay? All who call upon the name of the Lord will be saved. So, guys, again, just set some time. And it doesn't matter where you're at. You can be on the toilet, you can be in your house, you can be at your job. It doesn't matter where you're at, what location, in your car, it doesn't matter. Okay, I was in my apartment when I got saved. So, guys, it doesn't matter. But again, just follow the ABCs. Just admit to God. Say, I've broken at least, I know I've broken at least once of your laws. I'm a liar. And you say lying is a sin, so I'm a sinner. And I don't want to go to hell, so I'm going to put my faith in the fact that you died and rose again for me. So I'm putting faith in your sacrifice for my sin. And I'm going to confess to you, God, that I want to be saved. I want to be saved. So I'm believing that you can save me, and I'm asking for salvation. And guys, he will save you. All right, I love you, and but don't put this off. This is the most important thing that you can do. And again, don't be a spiritual narcissist. Amen. God bless.